Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Hyams here, and Bob Stewart nowhere to be found, folks. And you know that these are some of my favorite episodes because I don't have to worry about my loving co-host cutting me off when I want to ask a great question of our guest. So I brought a great guest so that I could have a great conversation, and Bob's off somewhere doing something. I don't know. He'll be back, I promise. I know you all love Bob. I love Bob. Folks, here's the thing I want to remind you. Just because you've been listening to Win, Make, Give this whole time doesn't mean you ever went back and did the Wealth series when we did Wealth 2.0, and you probably need it in your life now more than ever. Boy, economic times are always a challenge, so I'm going to recommend you visit winmakegive.com/wealth, where you can easily get the workbooks and the episodes when we took you through, Bob, Ben, and myself, through how to create more wealth and manage your wealth better. If you go to just winmakegive.com, you won't get to the Wealth series, although you can through the website. You will easily, though, get to some of the other shows on our podcast network. Have you checked out the 15-Point Plan? Have you checked out the Achieve Your Apex podcast, the Built How podcast, Lead Conversion Behind the Scenes? How about No Days Off with Brian Gubernick? How about Eric Hatch with Redefine? And one of my favorites in our network, that's Clint Swindoll doing the Tell Me Something Good podcast. Folks, check out all of our podcasts because there's something for everybody out there. Now, let's get back to today when I get to celebrate Bob not being here. Dave, insert some cheering music and all that. Okay, thanks. All right. I brought a guest, though. And, you know, when Bob said to me he didn't think he was going to make it this week, I said, no worries, Bob, because this guest is going to talk about a topic that's one of my favorite words, and I look forward to having a conversation with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to welcome to the podcast, Roger Gerard. Roger, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chad. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to be your only distraction today. So
there you go. Absolutely. You can audition for my co-host role here. Maybe we'll just replace Bob one of these days. I keep threatening. I like the guy too much, though. Roger, on our website, on our podcast, we don't introduce people. I gave you a hard time. You said at the beginning, you know, when you do the intro, and I said, nope, I'm not going to do an intro. I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. I don't want some chat GPT, perfectly written intro, bio, all that stuff. We want to know who the man is we're hearing from today. Tell us about Roger.
All right, a little bit about me. I'll give you the 25-cent tour. I grew up in Bay City, Michigan. And moved around the state of Michigan, down to Detroit, up to Petoskey in a resort town, and then over to Wisconsin. So I know the Midwest quite well, and I've had 50 years of a career that I've been very blessed to have. I spent probably the first decade of my career, the 70s, working with health education organizations like the Heart Association, the Cancer Society, and so on. Then I went to work in manufacturing and spent a few years, first of all, with Gulf and Western, which was the largest conglomerate in the world at the time, teaching leadership and development. And then I went to work for the Employers Association of Detroit and had clients like IBM and Burroughs and Marriott and General Motors and Ford. And it was a fascinating couple of years. One of my mentors and previous leaders went to work around that time with a healthcare system and invited me to come visit. And I found myself back in healthcare in a hospital system. And I spent 8 years there, eventually becoming the senior VP of HR, and then moved over into Wisconsin, where I took the role of chief learning officer for a healthcare system, for 23 years. Retired, quote unquote. I use the word repurposing today. I repurposed in 2014, and I have been consulting for the last decade to a number of healthcare organizations, along with some non-healthcare manufacturing-based organizations. So that's the 25-cent tour.
There you go. Okay, so hundreds of questions come out of all of that. The first one being, I'm hoping you live somewhere warm finally.
Wisconsin, south of Green Bay, is not warm. In fact,
No,
we have snow.
Michigan is not warm. Wisconsin is not warm. Believe me, I grew up on the other side of the lake up there in Toronto.
Yeah.
Yet I have the pleasure now of the Sun State down here in Florida. You're still up there in the cold. You
Well,
survived.
actually, we have snow scheduled for tonight. So,
Yeah, and folks, this is mid-March when we're recording. I don't know when this is going to air, so don't be panicked if you're hearing this in April or something and you're like, "What? There's snow?" No, it's mid-March while we're recording. Tomorrow, though, is officially the first day of spring. You shouldn't be having snow anymore up there.
no.
It might be time to consider the move one of these days. Okay, you wrote a book. You said you repurposed. I had a mentor who says he rewired. He didn't retire. He rewired how he's going to do it. You wrote a book called Lead with Purpose.
Correct.
Now, folks, I'm going to mention it throughout the call, so you'll be able to get to it. And you can go to Roger's website, which is rogergerard.com, to be able to get the book. Give me a 30,000-foot view of what I'm going to find in Lead with Purpose.
Yeah. What actually, Lead with Purpose was written almost simultaneously, a little bit after my previous book called Owning the Room. Owning the Room was a leadership book focused on how to become a highly interactive and responsive leader in a very changing and challenging world. It was the culmination of about 20 years of executive and leadership coaching and development. As I was writing that book, I began to understand, doing the research, how alienated a lot of people feel in the different professions: nursing, physicians, law enforcement, teaching. And I started interviewing people and gathering notes. And that alienation really disturbed me. And what I began to understand is that we had a very, very high level of turnover in key professions who were being treated as commodities. Teachers are being treated as commodities today. Nurses are being treated as commodities. What's a commodity? It's something that you can plug and play. A commodity like for instance, steel or copper or some of the precious metals. It doesn't matter what brand you put on it. It's still what it is. And we're treating professionals that way in many different industries. And that's not how professionals came into their practice of their profession. They came in to do unique, special work, and they're highly trained. And when you start treating them as commodities, they feel alienated. They begin to disconnect. And we're seeing a great deal of turnover in key industries that support society. That's why I wrote Lead with Purpose. It's all about re-inspiring people who have been alienated.
So this isn't, and I love that you just said that, because it's not just you got to be a teacher for this to matter. It's not you got to be a nurse or a doctor for this to matter. This is any industry where there's, a leader and people below it, that the people below it can always end up feeling like a commodity. I mean, heck, I could take this to a family and say,
Sure.
there's the parents as the boss, and then are the kids almost treated like a commodity in the family? So this can be applied into so many different areas of what our audience is going to get as entrepreneurs. It's not necessarily, if you're not in that field, stop listening, because these are going to be some valuable lessons.
Oh, you're absolutely correct about that. You're talking to a guy that was the oldest of 10. So I know what it feels like.
And I was the only child, and I think my parents were very proud of the fact that they knew to stop after one. Okay. We've talked recently with some people about culture. That's a word that always comes up. I don't care. I think a decade from now, we'll still be talking about workplace culture and stuff like that. Talk to me about creating that culture where we're not treating our people like commodities. What do we need to know? What do we need to learn? What do we need to hear from Roger, a guy who's written a book on it, to make sure we're creating a culture that treats our people like people and a resource?
I am so glad you asked that question. First of all, I think the word culture has been overused, misused, and abused. Um, it's become a throwaway word. When we don't understand what's going on, it must be part of the culture.
I, I
Um,
really like that answer. I might clip that and be playing that for a lot of people to hear that. That is one of those words that's on my list of,
yeah.
buzzwords that need to go away.
If we're going to use it, let's use it properly. And basically, the culture of any organization or society lives in the minds and hearts of the people who are there doing the daily living and the daily work. And if we understand that's where it lives, all of the nonsense about putting cultural values and mission statements and vision statements and all that craziness on the wall really starts to help you understand how silly we've been about this stuff. The culture manifests in behavior. And so, if we're going to change anything, we have to look at the behaviors that are helping us support our needs and goals, and those behaviors that are not. And then we need to begin creating an environment where people naturally behave in the way we need people to behave so that things get done in a way that makes sense. And we aren't doing it that way. Much of what passes as organizational work is a product of cultural structures being overlaid on people with the
Okay.
expectation that you conform to what that overlay requires. And that's not going to work really well when we begin talking about whether or not people are engaged in the work that they were there to do. I found in some of my research that people come into their new jobs highly motivated, highly engaged, highly intentional, and within 2 years they're burning out in their professions.
Sure. I've
That
been
two
there. I've
that
done
two
that.
year,
I'm coming on
yeah,
board
I'll bet
blazing, and
you
within
have.
2 years, I'm saying to my wife, time for a change.
So what's causing that? And therefore we have a society in which 2 and 3 year job tenures are becoming natural and normal. Um, my dad turned screws on carburetors in a manufacturing plant for 27 years.
Right. Got
Um,
the watch, hung it up when it was time, right?
well, yeah, he was a good soldier,
Yep.
and you don't see that kind of engagement and that kind of energy in the organizations today, and it's because how we're treating people. Um,
Okay. So help me build a different culture. We'll use the
yeah,
word for now. Help me build a culture that people are going to say 10 years from now, I still love working here. I can't wait to go to work every day. What are the steps to build this culture up?
well, yeah, there's a couple of things. First
Okay.
of all, you have to understand what we're doing wrong, and
Okay.
I'll tell you what leaders are doing wrong with the mistakes they're making. And that will give you the introduction that we require to understand what we need to do right. Um,
Okay.
what we're doing wrong, leaders fail to listen to the people they have in their charge with respect. They hire people, they look at resumes, they look at the training, they add more training. And then when they have them in their charge, they don't listen to what they bring. If somebody brings a problem, I don't want to hear it. I just get the work done. I hired you, go do it. You have to listen to your professionals. The professionals know more about the daily work of the organization than anybody else on the job. Certainly, anybody in the office, in the back office. The
Okay.
second thing, blame and shame. When things go wrong, leaders seem to want to find out who did it. That is poisonous in organizations today, and it leads us to a question of what does it really mean to hold people accountable? When I hear people use that phrase, I know we have a blame and shame environment.
Okay. Hold the accountable conversation. We're going to come back to that one.
I'll bet we do.
Yes.
The blame and shame is poison in an organization because once somebody sees a leader blaming somebody for something, they realize that they might be next. And it creates the stage for a very, very non-communicative environment, an environment where people don't want to spread the truth. Expecting loyalty without giving loyalty.
Mm.
Loyalty is a reciprocal relationship. And we expect as leaders people to be loyal to the organization. And at the first sign of a downturn, we lay them off. Yikes. What kind of loyalty is that?
Interesting.
And so as we think about the relationship, what kind of relationship do you want to create with the professionals you hire? Over standardization of work. Certainly, work has to be standardized. If you don't standardize it, you can't become more efficient and you can't manage quality. It has to
Right.
be standardized. But you can over standardize it to the point where the professionals who have years of training, licenses, certifications are no longer allowed to exercise judgment. That'll never work over time. Professionals expect to be able to exercise judgment, especially when you're talking to high level folks like physicians,
Yep.
nurses, people who have not just 2 or 3 years of training, but sometimes decades of training. Uh, as you think about these things, understand that um, all of this feels like bullying to people, and that's my last point about what leaders get wrong. Um, People feel bullied when they don't have a say in their work, when they don't have a say in the environment that they're working in, and it the blame and shame is bullying on steroids. High level leaders never allow bullying in their organizations, whether it's coming from the leadership themselves or among the people, among the professionals. When bullying takes place, everybody shuts down. So those are the things people get wrong. Now, so what do you do right? Okay.
Just do the opposite, right?
Yeah, it's the opposite. You got to start listening to your people and,
Yep.
treat what you hear with respect. You might disagree. Okay, tell them why you disagree, but listen to them. Make sure they feel heard. Number two,
Right.
eliminate, totally abolish any blame and shame in the organization. Abolish it. Certainly, there are going to be situations where people are either incompetent or unknowledgeable about the challenges in front of them and need to be helped to learn and to grow and do the things that are required. If it's a training issue, train them. Sometimes it's a willingness issue. If it's a willingness issue, talk to them about that, see why they're unwilling to do what needs to be done. And if you can't change that, help them find success somewhere else because they're not going to be successful where they are today. Loyalty means commitment. And so if you're going to expect loyalty from people, then offer the commitment in return. In one organization I worked in, we offered a no layoff philosophy. No matter what happened in the organization, people knew they weren't going to be laid off. And we were there for over 20 years with that philosophy and did not lay people off, regardless of what happened to the
People
economy.
left, they just
Oh,
weren't
sure.
laid off because cutbacks and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Someone
And
needed
if
to be fired for something, or somebody obviously quit and moved on, but there just weren't layoffs, is what you're saying.
Well, we had one unit in our department in our organization that we sold off to another company, and they didn't want the employees. So we had to find a place for 200 employees, and we found places for almost 150 to 175 of those employees, and the others we found employment elsewhere in the community and kept them whole until they had new jobs. And they spoke very highly of us. But that's what loyalty looks like
Okay.
as you work with professionals. Standardization is important, but involve people in standardization. Let them help you decide what the standard processes ought to be and where they can exercise judgment and where they can't. Let them be co authors in that process. We make the mistake of saying, well, we want buy in. And what we really mean is we want compliance.
Yes.
Buy
Buy-in means I want you to agree with what I'm telling you. Yeah.
Yeah, but buy-in requires co-authorship. So the step leaders have to be willing to take is allowing and cultivating that idea of co-authorship around what the environment people are working in and the work that they're doing. And bar none, no more bullying. Bullying's got to go. And the minute somebody bullies, there ought to be consequences.
And that's true from elementary school all the way up to
Yeah,
corporate boardroom, right?
they should teach this stuff in kindergarten, and I say that to executive groups all the time. This is really basic human relations, and unfortunately, a lot of people move into their leadership through the Peter Principle, and then they've never been trained and they've never been exposed to these ideas as a leadership set of concepts. So,
It's interesting, Roger, because if I sat any leader down and asked them if their kid was being bullied at school, what would they do? They'd, of course, go over the deep end on, oh, the teacher has to get involved. We have to get involved. We have to have a meeting with the other parents. Everybody, bullying can't be, right? And then if you say, okay, now what's going on in your office, right? They wouldn't even recognize the fact that they're
no,
just doing the grown-up version of the same thing.
no, I did a consult in one organization years ago where the famous statement of this CEO in this organization was, "You get paid, don't you? Go do it." That was, and he would do it with a finger in the face of the person he was talking to. I had the opportunity to videotape him in one of those conversations, and I played it back 2 days later as part of a leadership development program. And it was the first time he saw how he looked when he did that to a group of people. It was a kind of an eye-opening experience for him.
Yeah, I would think so.
People aren't aware that they're doing that.
All right, so instead of Bob Stewart today, folks, I've got Roger Gerard here with me, author of Lead with Purpose and other books, right? And you can go to Roger's website, which is rogergerard.com, where you can get access to his library so you can figure out which one you want to start with as you purchase a book. Roger, I want to ask you a question you weren't expecting before we get on to the next topic. I see a bunch of books on your shelf behind you. Our audience doesn't get to see us yet. I get to see you and you get to see me. What's your number one recommended self-development book not written by Roger Gerard if somebody came up to you and said, what's the number one book I should make sure I read?
Oh my gosh, there are so many, but one that comes up all the time. People ask me to make book recommendations. This was written by a guy named Edward Friedman in 1996. He actually died in the middle of writing this, and his colleagues finished it for him. It's called Failure of Nerve.
Failure of Nerve?
Yes. He starts with a discussion of the explorers and what they had to do as they traversed great danger going across the oceans of the world. And then he comes into the current century, into the 80s and 90s, and he starts making predictions about how we're treating people with way too much empathy and way too much care, and not causing people to learn courage. And courage means self-differentiating yourself, not flying with the herd. It's a wonderful read.
Hearing you say that, Roger, all I can think of is I don't know any kid from the 80s, myself included, who would say we were too soft on the kids back then, especially looking at the world today, right? Us 80s kids were get out there, figure it out, go. Yet he was writing that they were being nowadays, right? We've only gotten softer and all that. So this generation doesn't know that word courage. It might be
you're right about that. And Friedman was a Jewish rabbi. He was a consultant to President Lyndon Baines Johnson, and he was a family practice therapist. So he had a very broad range of knowledge and skills here. And when he wrote that, he predicted things that would change in society over the next few decades. And we're seeing that today. His predictions are coming true, and it's not pretty.
Did he predict the Super Bowl winner for 2026?
No. Not that clean, and the Packers weren't on his list.
Oh, well, I would have laid some money if the way he was going. All right. You mentioned a word I told you to hold on before we talked about, because it's the whole reason I booked this interview was the word accountability.
Yep.
And it's a favorite word of so many. We just did an episode like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. It probably dropped with Dr. Laura Gallagher, where we talked about a culture of accountability. There's two of those words in one sentence for you right there. Talk to me about your take on the word, the term, and accountability in general.
Yeah, actually, it might lead me into a second conversation on motivation, but we'll start with accountability.
Okay.
Accountability is misunderstood as something that a leader is supposed to hold people to. And
Yes.
the phrase, we've got to hold people accountable, has become almost an iconic phrase in today's society. I think that's rather silly. When I was younger and took out my first mortgage on my first house, uh, I worked with a bank, and the bank didn't call me every month and say, "Hey, I I got to know if you're going to make the payment." The accountability for that payment didn't belong to the bank; it belonged to me. I was accountable to the bank for making that payment.
Sure.
Accountability is something I owe you when I make you a promise. And if you have to hold me accountable, then the relationship has been damaged somewhere. And that's what we should be talking about. The relationship has been damaged. Otherwise, I'm going to keep my promises. And I want to make sure that you assume knowledgeably and correctly that I'm going to keep my promises so that we can have a great relationship. The minute we go into this holding people accountable for their work, we're causing leaders to think they have to micromanage. And when things go wrong, they have to blame and shame. All of that is negativity. None of that causes human motivation and human engagement. The flip side of this whole conversation is our understanding of incentives and motivation. We think we have to incentivize performance in order for people to be motivated. That's crazy. Once you do that, you only get what you incentivize. Professionals don't come to work unmotivated. Nurses come to work wanting to help people. That's what they tell us when we interview them and hire them. Physicians want to practice high-level science. That's why they went to medical school. Law enforcement want to protect communities. That's why they went into police work. Teachers want to raise the knowledge and skill levels of the students are in front of them. They are already motivated. We destroy that motivation with incentives. With incentives, what we're really trying to do is manipulate people. And nobody likes to be manipulated. So we end up destroying engagement. Those two things.
Push, pause. Go back about 1 minute
Yep.
and listen to that 1 minute right there again from Roger about that, right? It's the relationship. It's if we have to incentivize, if they're already motivated, and by incentivizing, all we're doing is manipulating them. What a perfect way to explain that, Roger.
Yeah, thank you. And so how does this relate to accountability? When you hire somebody, they're making promises to you that certain things are going to be done in certain ways by virtue of their training and their background and their experience and all that stuff. You don't have to hold them accountable until things go wrong. And even then, before you start the blame and shame thing, maybe we ought to find out why. What happened? What did they do that caused their behavior to deviate from the expected behaviors? And perhaps there were good reasons for that. A good example of that in a hospital client situation, I learned that they were having problem with needle sticks with the nurses.
Okay.
And it's a fairly common problem for medical organizations. Needles get thrown into garbage bags, and suddenly somebody gets stuck, and it happens. So, but this particular set of problems were pretty frequent, and so I went to the quality folks and I said, I have to have an understanding how many needle sticks are occurring every month in this organization. And the director of quality looked at me and said, well, the reported number of needle sticks is, and gave me a whole bunch of data. I didn't ask for the reported number because I knew a lot were going unreported. And I had to start digging to find out what was really going on. And I found out that when someone had a needle stick, they were sent to training for a day, and it felt like punishment. So nobody reported their needle sticks, which
Sure.
is a very, very risky decision.
Sure.
I literally had to help the organization create a policy that encouraged a higher level number of needle sticks so that we knew how many were really occurring.
Interesting.
And it was
Interesting
about
thing.
fostering a climate of honesty and openness so that we could protect people.
Yeah, and I want our audience to hear that, right? We have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of them in the sales industry. We're holding people accountable to making certain number of calls, dials, client meetings, whatever it is that salespeople are all looking at doing. And here you're hearing it, right? You don't need the incentives of having the
No,
contest. You don't need to be holding them accountable. You need to be hiring them and explaining the part of the hiring is that you're going to be accountable, and it's them keeping their word to you, because as soon as you have to chase them, what I'm hearing, Roger, is there's a breakdown in the relationship, and
correct.
that's what needs to be solved and figured out.
Exactly right.
Okay. All right. Again, I'm talking to Roger Gerard. You can go to rogergerard.com. You can find out a lot more about him and things that he's got available, including his latest book, Lead with Purpose. Roger, I love this. At the beginning of before we started and I hit record to get the podcast going, usually we get 2 or 3 minutes with our guests just to kind of lay things out. And you said to me, you said, Chad, whatever we get into, I'm ready for it. Just do me a favor. When we get to the end, make sure I get to talk about the 5 promises of the 2 actions. So, Roger, I'm setting you up for it because that's what you wanted to make sure we got to right near the end. Now, before he even gets going on this, folks, remember, you can always join us in our Facebook group, Win, Make, Give. You can share these episodes. You should be subscribed to the podcast so you never miss one when they drop, because who knows what the next episode is going to have in store for you. And we love your feedback. So don't hesitate to leave a review. Don't hesitate to reach out to Bob or myself directly. Let us know your thoughts. We've seen some great postings on Facebook lately where you're sharing episodes that matter to you. We love you for doing it. Keep it up. Now, Roger, tell me the 5 promises of the 2 actions. You didn't even tell me what we were getting into. You just said I should ask you about it.
Yeah, it's not a secret, and it's in my books. And what we'll do is I tend to end a lot of executive retreats with this piece as well. Promise
Okay.
number 1, I will listen to you with respect, and I'll take your input seriously. If I disagree with you, I'll tell you why, and we can have a conversation about that. That's promise number 1. Promise number 2, I'll help you learn and grow as a professional. It's my job to help you learn and grow. Number 3, I will help you be wildly successful, maybe more successful than you ever thought you would be. The whole idea here is your success becomes our success. Promise number 4, I'll make sure you're compensated competitively. Now, that doesn't mean 50% comp ratio. Most data, when we do salary surveys and research, is a year or older. If you want to compensate people professionally and competitively, you better be at the 60% comp ratio or higher.
Okay.
Promise number 5, I will have your back when things go south. Not the word if, when things go south. We're not going to have blame and shame in our organization. We're going to help one another, and I'm going to have your back. Those are the 5 promises. And if you keep those 5 promises, easy to say, hard to do, if you keep those 5 promises, you'll have an engaged workforce that really loves working with you. 2 steps. Go and see, step 1. Most leaders, in my experience, spend the lion's share of their time in their offices. They're pushing around numbers. They're pushing around data. They're writing reports for their bosses. They're trying to justify their decisions to their leadership or their boards, and they don't go out on the unit floor and see what's going on.
Manage by walking around.
Exactly right. And, the old Tom Peters line, if somebody asked him once, how do I do that? And he said, go to your office, get a hammer, get a nail, and nail your damn door shut. Uh, what you have to do is you have to understand the workplace. You have to understand what people are doing out there and how the work is moving or not moving. I sent an entire group of executives out for a 2-hour experiment. I sent them out as part of this workshop, and I said, you've got 2 hours. Go to your work area, stand in the corner and just watch and come back and tell me what you see. They came back and they were really proud of themselves. They fixed all kinds of problems. They looked at some of the mistakes that were being made, and they decided to fix the mistakes and so on. And when they got done with the report, I told them they all failed. Their job was to go and see. They were fixing problems that the employees should have been fixing, not them. They should have been helping those employees fix those problems themselves. So that's the go and see part. The go and do part is, now that you've done that, what can you do in immediate action to enable these people to fix their own problems and solve their own issues and improve their own work? Because the more you can encourage them to do that, the less you need to intervene and interfere with their daily work. And you can put your energies somewhere else. Go and see, go and do.
2 simple actions right there, right? 5 promises. You want them? Scroll back just a few moments, write them down, right? Have your people initial that. You sign that, give them a copy. Here are the promises I'm going to make. Don't put the vision up on the wall. Put the promises you're making up on the wall, right? Let the people know you've got their back when it's going to go south, and all the other promises in there. And then 2 really simple actions. Go see, go do. Love that, Roger. Folks, you can visit him at rogergerard.com. You can connect with him there. If you've got any questions, you can get the book there. Roger, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, passing the time, spending some time together while my friend Bob is who knows where doing who knows what. But man, I got a lot out of today. I appreciate you taking the time with us.
All right, Chad, thank you very much. I enjoyed.
All right, folks, remember, you can join us in our Facebook group, and you should also just go to winmakegive.com, where you can then get links to the Wealth Series and all the other podcasts on our network. Until our next episode, as always, do good.